What if I told you that buried beneath the golden sands of Egypt, an ancient god's shattered soul still lingers, waiting to rise again? This is not a myth. This is a true forgotten chapter of history. In the dry heart of the Egyptian desert, buried under centuries of shifting sand and silence, a discovery was made that would unsettle even the most seasoned archaeologists. It began not with a grand expedition, but with a whisper, a rumor among local Bedouins about a cursed tomb deep within the Valley of the Kings, sealed with stone, untouched by time. Dr. Evelyn Hart, a historian from Oxford known for her calm demeanor and relentless curiosity, was drawn to this rumor like a moth to flame. She had spent her life chasing echoes of the past, but this was different. There were no records, no ancient scrolls mentioning a forgotten pharaoh named Setep-en-Ra, no lineage, no legacy, just a name etched into the base of a broken obelisk found half buried in the sand, its glyphs scorched by fire, as if someone had tried to erase his memory from history itself. Evelyn led a small team into the desert under a veil of secrecy. Their guide, an old man named Yusuf, refused to approach the site after nightfall. He was not meant to be remembered, he warned, staring into the horizon with eyes clouded by something more than age. Setep-en-Ra was buried alive by his own priests. They found the tomb carved into the face of a cliff, its entrance concealed by the slabs of collapsed rock and hardened earth. Unlike the lavish, gold-lined tombs of kings past, this one was brutalist, sharp angles, black stone, and no welcoming inscriptions. It was as if the tomb itself rejected the living. Inside, the air was unnaturally cold, and time seemed to slow as they descended. Torches flickered in ways that defied wind or breath. The walls were etched with symbols Evelyn had never seen, jagged, chaotic lines that pulsed with a kind of visual noise. One chamber revealed a mural painted in a style unlike anything in Egyptian art, a scene of a pharaoh not seated on a throne, but bound in chains of flame, screaming as jackal-headed priests turned their backs. The sarcophagus was unlike any they had seen before. Pitch black, sealed with molten metal that had hardened like obsidian. It bore no cartouche, only one word scratched deep into the lid in hurried, jagged strokes: silence. When they cracked the seal, a burst of air escaped, not stale but sweet, almost fragrant, like jasmine rotted into syrup. Inside lay not a mummy, but bones, charred, fused, twisted as if burned from within. But the skull remained oddly intact, the jaw locked in a silent scream. That night, the camp fell into unease. Yusuf vanished before dawn. Evelyn began to dream of red sand and bleeding moons. One team member, Hastings, awoke speaking in a dialect no one could recognize. He clawed at his throat, whispering, "Setep, Setep still sees," before collapsing. They tried to leave, but the desert had changed. Their GPS spun wildly, compasses failed, and the stars above no longer matched their charts. Something ancient had stirred. Something buried not by sand, but by intention. Evelyn turned back to the tomb. The symbols on the walls now made sense, somehow. They were warnings, not of death, but of forgetting, of erasure. Setep-en-Ra had ruled not through power, but through fear. His voice could bend minds, his gaze could blind. He was a pharaoh of silence, and the priests had sealed him not to protect him from time, but to protect time from him. Inside the burial chamber, Evelyn found a hidden compartment beneath the bones. A scroll sealed in glass, perfectly preserved. Written in a hybrid script of Greek, Aramaic, and ancient Egyptian, it was a confession. It told of Setep's rise, a child born under a black eclipse, whose first cries drove his mother mad. He never spoke publicly. Instead, he whispered to his high priests, who would translate his will to the people. Crops failed in his presence. Rivers ran backwards. Birds fell dead from the sky. He wasn't worshipped. He was endured. The scroll ended with a final plea from the high priest: "If he ever wakes, let no man speak his name." But Evelyn already had, out loud, more than once, and beneath her feet, the sand began to move. The ground trembled beneath Evelyn's boots, soft at first, like a pulse, then stronger, as if something massive stirred beneath the earth. Dust rose from cracks snaking across the stone floor. The team shouted in panic, but their voices sounded distant, swallowed by the strange pressure thickening the air. The temperature dropped sharply. Evelyn's breath became visible, and her torchlight flickered unnaturally, casting shadows that twisted and danced against the walls. The skull inside the sarcophagus began to vibrate slightly, its empty eye sockets fixed on her, as if aware. She froze. "Do not speak his name," Evelyn whispered to herself, gripping the scroll tightly. The warning was clear, yet too late. The name had already left her lips hours before, repeatedly, carelessly. She could feel a cold weight pressing into her chest, as though unseen eyes now watched from every corner of the chamber. Dr. Hastings, pale and drenched in sweat, stumbled toward her, his eyes wide and unfocused. "He's awake," he rasped. "I can hear him. In my head." From the walls, faint whispers bled into the air. Not words, but syllables, rhythmic, almost melodic, yet nauseating in their unnatural cadence. The murals shifted subtly, as though the painted priests now turned their heads toward Evelyn and her team. Yusuf's voice rang out behind them, though he had vanished earlier. But when they turned, he was not there. Only his voice lingered. The desert does not forget, even if men do. Suddenly, the heavy black stone slab they had forced open earlier groaned, moving without any visible force. Evelyn backed away, her instincts screaming, but her curiosity held her rooted. From within the sarcophagus, a low hum grew louder, a vibration so deep it rattled their bones. The bones inside shifted, not as though disturbed by tremors, but deliberately, slowly, purposefully. The twisted ribcage expanded. The jaw widened as if drawing breath. A faint, wheezing gasp escaped from where no lungs should exist. Hastings collapsed to his knees, clutching his temples. "He speaks inside me," he cried, his voice laced with agony. "He speaks." The others tried to pull him away, but his limbs stiffened unnaturally. Blood trickled from his nose, his mouth curling into a grin that was not his own. In desperation, Evelyn unfurled the scroll completely, scanning its brittle surface for anything, any ritual, any instruction, anything that could stop this horror. Her heart pounded louder than the tremors, and then she saw it. A final, hastily scrawled line. "Silence will bind him, speech will free him." Her stomach dropped. They had spoken too much already. Every word exchanged in that chamber had loosened his prison. Even their terrified whispers had served as keys. Suddenly, the whispers around them synchronized into words, clear and terrifying. "I am returned." The sarcophagus lid, though impossibly heavy, slid fully aside. The skeletal figure inside remained fused and charred, but its skull tilted, as if acknowledging them. Then, from the gaping mouth, a thin black mist began to rise, curling upwards like fingers. The torches extinguished. Only the faint bioluminescent glyphs on the walls provided a sickly glow. Yusuf's voice returned, closer now, almost inside her ear. "Do you see now, the priests erased him from history not for revenge, but for mercy." Dr. Kim, one of the linguists, shrieked and ran for the exit, but the path had changed. The corridors of the tomb no longer led where they once had. Walls shifted like sliding puzzle pieces, reshaping the space itself. The black mist thickened, and with it, a dreadful weight fell upon Evelyn's mind, a creeping sense of hopelessness, as though her will to resist was being siphoned away. Her hands trembled, but her eyes remained locked on the scroll. It spoke of one final hope, the binding chant, not spoken, but written. If inscribed again with blood, the last offering of life, it might reseal the prison. Evelyn drew a knife from her belt, slicing her palm open with a swift motion. Pain cleared the fog in her mind momentarily. She pressed her bleeding hand against a clean section of wall beneath the glyphs and, with her trembling fingers, began to trace the ancient binding symbols. The mist reacted instantly, shrinking back as though struck. The skeletal figure within the sarcophagus spasmed violently. A deafening guttural sound erupted, not from the body, but from the air itself, a roar of rage and defiance. Yet Evelyn continued, ignoring her own weakening pulse. The others gathered around her, instinctively shielding her as they watched the black vapor twist and writhe like a dying serpent. As the final glyph was completed, The ground shook violently one last time. The black mist was sucked back into the skeletal remains, and the sarcophagus lid slammed shut with a thunderous echo that reverberated through the entire tomb. Then, silence, complete, absolute silence. The torches reignited on their own. The air slowly warmed. The corridors realigned. Hastings collapsed, unconscious but breathing. The glyphs on the walls dimmed and faded into the stone, leaving only the smooth, blank surfaces behind. Evelyn staggered back, her vision blurry from blood loss. But she had done it. They had come dangerously close, far too close. The binding held, but the cost had been great. Yet even as she caught her breath, a dreadful thought gnawed at her mind. Was this truly the end, or merely a pause? Outside, the desert wind howled softly, as if whispering to itself the forbidden name once more. Days had passed since their narrow escape from the tomb. But for Evelyn, the weight of what they had awakened lingered heavier than any physical wound. The desert had returned to its stillness, as if the storm never occurred, but her dreams were no longer her own. At night, she saw flashes of ancient ceremonies, hooded priests chanting in circles, sacrifices offered under moonlight, and above them, the towering presence of the very entity they nearly unleashed. The name was never spoken, but its presence was unmistakable. In the safety of the university's archives, far from the cursed sands, Evelyn pored over every scrap of forgotten lore related to the Lost Dynasty. Scrolls that referenced the king beneath all sands. Texts so obscure that even her mentors deemed them an apocryphal, and in each, the same cryptic phrase appeared repeatedly: he waits for the pact to break. Dr. Hastings, still recovering, joined in her research when he could. His encounters within the tomb had left him mentally fragile, but he was determined to help. His voice was quieter now, as if afraid that even speaking too loudly might attract unwanted attention. "We sealed him," he whispered one evening. "But for how long? That scroll you copied, it was old, and it spoke of renewing the binding, not permanent containment." Evelyn nodded, her eyes scanning a newly found parchment. "It suggests the pact must be renewed every few centuries," she murmured. "But we don't know how many renewals have already failed." Hastings looked pale. Then, if the last binding was already weakening, perhaps we were not the first to stumble upon that tomb. Others may have disturbed it long before us. The thought chilled them both. And yet, something about the timeline bothered Evelyn. She traced a finger along the fragile parchment. "Look here, it mentions an artifact, a vessel, required to maintain the pact. A ceremonial urn said to contain the essence of his first victim. Without it, any binding ritual would eventually erode." "But we never found such an urn," Hastings said slowly, sitting upright. "Only the sarcophagus. If the vessel is missing, the next weakening could happen, sooner than we thought." A knock interrupted their grim conversation. Professor Maliek, head of the Department of Ancient Cultures, entered the room with a grave expression. "You must see this," Malik said, handing Evelyn a tablet displaying a breaking news report. A group of black market treasure hunters had broadcast their discovery online. An ornate urn pulled from an unmarked burial site near the southern edge of the very same desert. The engravings were unmistakable, identical to the glyphs from the tomb. Evelyn's blood ran cold. "They found the vessel. But if they remove it from the desert," Hastings whispered, "the pact will crumble." The report showed them proudly holding the urn, boasting of its value, completely unaware of the danger. The online video was already viral, spreading to millions. The vessel's exposure was not just physical, it was now being spoken of across the globe. The very act of talking about him, even digitally, fed the weakening of his prison. Evelyn stood abruptly. "We have to stop them before they leave the region." "But how?" Hastings protested. "They could be anywhere by now." Professor Malik raised a hand. "Actually, I may have a contact." Within hours, Evelyn found herself aboard a small chartered helicopter flying low over the desert, guided by Malik's informant, an ex-military tracker named Farid. The coordinates placed the treasure hunters at an abandoned mining outpost near the dune's edge. As night fell, their approach was concealed beneath the moonless sky. The helicopter landed a safe distance away, and they proceeded on foot, blending into the shadows. From a nearby ridge, they spotted the camp. 5 individuals, all armed, gathered around a campfire. And there, illuminated by flickering flames, sat the urn, its lid sealed tightly, the intricate symbols glowing faintly in the dark. "They don't even realize they're feeding him," Evelyn whispered. Fareed nodded grimly. "They speak his name on camera. They share the video. The binding is weakening as we stand here." Suddenly, a low tremor rippled through the ground beneath them. Distant at first, but undeniable. The same sensation they felt back in the tomb. Evelyn's pulse quickened. It's already started. The wind shifted unnaturally, swirling sand into brief, twisting columns around the camp. The treasure hunters stood, alarmed. One of them grabbed the urn protectively, shouting at the others. Without warning, one man screamed, clutching his head. His voice became distorted, layers of unnatural tones blending with his own, a chorus of whispers that did not belong to him. His companions backed away in terror. From the dunes behind them, a shape began to rise. Not a man, not a beast, a silhouette woven from the swirling sand itself, vaguely humanoid, towering, its head crowned by what resembled ancient ceremonial horns. Hastings gasped from his hiding spot. "He's manifesting outside the tomb." The entity raised an elongated arm. The man holding the urn was lifted into the air, suspended like a marionette, his limbs twitching as though puppeted by invisible strings. Evelyn had seconds to act. She sprinted forward, emerging from cover, drawing the attention of the remaining hunters. Fareed covered her with precise shots into the air, driving panic into the group without injuring anyone. "Put it down," Evelyn shouted. "You don't understand what you're holding." But it was too late for the possessed man. His eyes glowed an unnatural amber as his body jerked. The entity spoke through him, its voice layered and ancient. "The pact is broken. I will reclaim." The sandstorm intensified, blinding everyone momentarily. Evelyn charged forward, diving toward the urn, and as the man collapsed, lifeless. She wrapped her arms around the vessel, shielding it as the entity shrieked, a sound that bypassed her ears and vibrated directly within her skull. Through sheer will, she began to chant softly, not aloud, but within her mind, repeating the ancient binding verses she had memorized from the scroll. The wind resisted. The ground fought against her balance. But Evelyn remained focused, gripping the urn with desperate strength. As the chant continued silently within her mind, the swirling sand lost its cohesion. The towering form wavered, fragments breaking apart like shattered glass. Its shrieks softened into a desperate hiss as the storm receded. The entity's form crumbled, sucked back into the earth like retreating fog. Silence returned once more. Evelyn lay gasping, still clutching the urn. The surviving treasure hunters, disoriented and terrified, fled into the dark. Fareed approached, pulling her to her feet. "You have it," he said, his voice low with both relief and dread. She nodded, staring into the glowing symbols on the vessel's surface. "This was never meant to be disturbed. We must return it and reseal the pact properly." The return journey across the barren wasteland felt eternal. Evelyn kept her hands wrapped tightly around the urn, as if releasing it for even a moment might invite disaster. The desert's night air bit into her skin, but the fear within her burned hotter. Fareed led them through the dunes, navigating the treacherous terrain with practiced ease. Behind them, Hastings stumbled slightly, the fatigue of both body and mind catching up to him. Yet none dared to complain. They all felt the invisible weight following them, an oppressive presence lingering just beyond sight. At dawn, the helicopter lifted them back toward Cairo. The rising sun painted the dunes gold, momentarily disguising the darkness buried beneath. Waiting for them at the university was Professor Malik, his face drawn with exhaustion, but eyes wide with urgency. Evelyn wasted no time. She placed the urn gently onto the oak table inside the sealed archives. "We need to act immediately," she said. "The ritual must be performed before the next moonrise, or we risk another manifestation." Malik nodded gravely. "I've gathered everything we need, but there's a complication." He gestured to a stack of old manuscripts. "According to these, the ritual requires not only the vessel, but also a living bloodline descendant from the original priests who first sealed him. Without it, the binding will be incomplete." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "And where are we supposed to find that? Those bloodlines vanished millennia ago." Malik's expression softened. "Not entirely. We traced one surviving line, and you, Evelyn, carry that blood. The room fell silent. Hastings blinked. Are you certain? Malik nodded. Your maternal ancestry links back to the ancient caretakers of the temple. The very reason your instincts led you so strongly to the tomb may not have been mere academic passion. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken, not out of fear, but out of a strange, unsettling understanding. The pull she had felt from the beginning, the sense of familiarity inside the tomb, it all made terrible sense now. So I am the key, she whispered. It has always been me. Hastings stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You can do this, Evelyn. You were meant to. Preparations for the ritual began immediately. Deep beneath the university lay a hidden ceremonial chamber, a relic of ancient scholarship, untouched for centuries. Torches lined the stone walls, their flames flickering and casting long, trembling shadows. The scent of incense filled the air, mingling with an unspoken tension. The urn was placed at the center of a large stone altar, surrounded by a carefully inscribed circular glyph, drawn with meticulous precision. Scrolls, ancient texts, and ceremonial artifacts were arranged methodically around the chamber. Malik handed Evelyn a dagger, small, ornate, its blade etched with symbols older than language itself. Only a drop of your blood is needed, he said softly. Evelyn inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She sliced a thin line across her palm, allowing a single droplet to fall onto the center glyph. The symbols pulsed, briefly illuminating the chamber with a faint amber glow. Malik and Hastings began chanting in unison, their voices low and rhythmic, ancient syllables vibrating through the stone walls. The air grew heavier with each verse. The torch flames elongated unnaturally, leaning toward the urn as though drawn by an invisible current. Suddenly, the chamber quivered. A low hum reverberated from the very ground beneath their feet. From the urn's sealed lid, thin wisps of black vapor began to seep, swirling in patterns that mimicked serpents twisting through the air. Evelyn's vision blurred for a moment. She felt something brush against her consciousness, a cold whisper curling around her thoughts. Join me. Your blood belongs to me. She clenched her jaw, refusing its pull, focusing on the chant resonating around her brain. Hastings noticed her strain and raised his voice, his chant turning more forceful, as if shielding her mind from the invasive whispers. The glyph's light intensified. The black tendrils recoiled slightly, but continued to push against the containment, swirling faster, clawing at the invisible barrier. Malik shifted the chant into the final binding verse, the most crucial segment of the ritual. Evelyn repeated after him, her voice firm despite the growing pressure against her mind. The entity shrieked in frustration, its disembodied voice echoing in multiple tones across the chamber walls. Dust rained from the ceiling as the ancient stone strained under the metaphysical force. But Evelyn's will held firm. Her voice grew louder, stronger. I call upon the pact of first blood, the guardians of the forgotten sands, by lineage unbroken, by sacrifice willingly given. Return him to slumber. A sudden blast of wind erupted from the urn, extinguishing every torch at once. The chamber plunged into darkness. Only the glowing glyph remained, burning fiercely as the vapor was sucked violently back into the urn. The lid sealed itself with an audible snap. The glyph's light slowly faded, leaving behind an eerie, oppressive silence. For several long moments, none of them moved. The weight of what they had just accomplished settled heavily upon their shoulders. Finally, Hastings broke the silence, his voice hoarse. Is it over? Evelyn exhaled, her hands trembling. For now, but this vessel must never be disturbed again. Professor Malik carefully approached the urn, inspecting the renewed seal. It is done, but let this remain our eternal secret. Humanity must never awaken him again. They locked the urn within a hidden vault, buried deep beneath reinforced steel and stone, where no curious hands could stumble upon it again, or so they hoped. Weeks passed since the ritual. Life, at least on the surface, seemed to return to normal. The university resumed its scholarly rhythms. Lectures filled the corridors, and curious students scurried through ancient libraries. But for Evelyn, normalcy was an illusion, thin and fragile. At night, she often woke in a cold sweat, heart racing, haunted by remnants of the voice that had tried to pull her into its grasp. The entity's whispers had faded, but echoes lingered like distant thunder beyond the horizon of her mind. She tried to distract herself by immersing in research. She buried herself in analyzing the temple's inscriptions, seeking any overlooked detail, any reassurance that the binding was absolute. But with every scroll and tablet she reviewed, the same unsettling truth stared back at her. Ancient bindings were never permanent. One evening, as the crimson Egyptian sun dipped behind the minarets, Professor Malik visited her office. His face was lined with concern. "You still feel it, don't you?" he asked softly. Evelyn sighed, setting down the scroll she had been studying. "It's like a pressure behind my thoughts. Faint, but always there." Malik nodded. "That is because part of you touched something most mortals never glimpse. Your bloodline made the ritual possible, but it also tied you permanently to the entity's awareness." She looked up sharply. "You mean I'm marked?" "In a way, yes," Malik replied. "But as long as the seal holds, it cannot reach you. Still, vigilance is essential." Evelyn's thoughts spiraled. What if someone finds the urn? What if greed, ignorance, or ambition breaks the seal again? Hastings joined them, carrying a thick, dusty tome under his arm. "I've been reading the additional records you recovered from the temple's western chamber. There's something you need to see." He opened the book to a diagram, a map of hidden catacombs beneath the ruins. Multiple chambers were marked with symbols similar to the glyph they had used for the ritual. These were not simply places of worship, Hastings explained. They were designed as containment vaults. Multiple vessels were created, not just one. Evelyn's stomach clenched. "You're saying there may be others?" Hastings nodded grimly. "Yes, and we only dealt with one fragment of him." The implication was horrifying. What they had encountered was merely a fraction of Setek's essence. Other pieces, scattered across forgotten corners of the world, remained dormant, or worse, active. Malik's voice was low and solemn. "The ancient priests never fully destroyed him. They fractured his essence and locked each part away, hoping to prevent any single force from gaining enough power to reawaken his full form." The weight of this revelation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Their victory had been incomplete. The world remained in silent danger, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the slumbering fragments beneath their feet. Evelyn rose to her feet, resolve hardening in her chest. "Then we have no choice. We find the rest. We contain them all." Hastings managed a faint smile. "The work of an archaeologist never ends, does it?" She returned the smile, though her eyes remained serious. "This isn't archaeology anymore. This is war." As night enveloped the city, their small alliance solidified. They would dedicate themselves to hunting down every last fragment of the ancient god, uncovering the hidden pieces before someone with darker intentions stumbled upon them first. Beyond the university's walls, the streets of Cairo bustled with life, oblivious, unaware of how close humanity had come to disaster. The winds carried ancient secrets through narrow alleys and across the Nile's calm surface, whispering tales of power, greed, and forgotten gods. And somewhere deep beneath the sands, beyond human sight, unseen eyes still watched, waiting. If you discovered that ancient gods could be real, and pieces of their power remained hidden across the world, would you risk your life to contain them? Or would the lure of forbidden knowledge tempt you instead? Tell us in the comments, should some mysteries remain buried forever? Or is it humanity's duty to confront every forgotten threat?